Nearly 4 decades in self-storage, and his influence has been felt by almost everybody who's ever been involved in the industry. A true legend on the legal side of self-storage. Today on Stories Behind the Door podcast, a Georgia SSA Hall of Famer, Scott Zucker. If you've ever built a storage facility, rented out a unit, or auctioned one off, it's likely one of those contracts had some terminology crafted by today's guest. He is an absolute legend in the self-storage industry, has the Hall of Fame plaques on his wall to show it. And today, I get to spend a half hour picking his brain on the podcast. I'm going to get to Scott Zucker very quickly. Right before I do, I want to give a shout out to our friends at Kiwi 2 Construction. Wayne Woolsey and his team, 30 plus years of building ground up self-storage and small bay flex. Simply the best in self-storage. If you missed Wayne on the podcast last week, Storage Unlocked, he told you there, get him in the process early. He can save you a lot of money and help you miss a lot of mistakes, which is what we all want to do. Kiwi 2, simply the best crews in steel. That's enough for Kiwi 2 for now. I want to get to this guy, Scott Zucker. I've been really looking forward to this for a long time. I know you were on How Faith Fuels Your Business a couple of months ago, shared some legal expertise as far as what happened with New York City and the Extra Space lawsuit as well back then. But today, it's all about Scott Zucker. This is Stories Behind the Door, and I want to get your journey in self-storage. So as always on this podcast, the first question, how did you get in this wonderful industry of self-storage?
Well, Thaddeus, first of all, thank you again for having me on the show, and I really appreciate it. Love talking with you. Love seeing you at conferences and the things you do for the industry. You get people talking, which is great, which is really what it's all about, to make sure we're all doing the best we can in this industry. My story goes back almost 40 years, and I it's sort of joke about it because boy, that's gone fast. It started out as a young lawyer doing construction development work for a firm here in Atlanta. Had clients interested in developing and managing self-storage. Literally turned to me and asked me the question, are there any laws? To which I answered, I don't know, but I will look. And lo and behold, there was statutes that dealt with the operation of self-storage facilities and a whole regulated industry that really no one was familiar with. And to look back and try to understand why we were pointed out as an industry that needed that regulation back in the 80s, sort of an interesting question. But ultimately, it's led to this universal law program around the country of state laws governing self-storage. So my 40-year journey has been working with some wonderful operators, developers, and managers, and it's brought us to today. It's great.
So one of the reasons I'm so excited to have you on the show today, there are not a lot of folks that have been around this industry for as long as you have, and nobody, quite frankly, that has the perspective from the legal side of it that you have. I've been lucky enough to have Mike Burnham and Ken Woolley, who got into ground up development and building portfolios back in the 70s. But from the legal side of it, such a different aspect, and especially for what's going on today. One of the reasons I was so excited to talk to you, of course, you've been involved for, as you said, almost next year, I think it'll be your 40th anniversary in the industry. It's changed so much. And there are things now on the horizon. We talked off camera right before we got on, and you came on Storage Unlocked a month and a half, 2 months ago when the New York City lawsuit against Extra Space happened, talked a little bit about some of the legislative pressures and legal pressures that are going on in the industry. I'm interested to pick your brain a little bit about how different things are today between the challenges that are facing our industry versus, like you said, back in the 1980s, like, I don't even know what the statutes are. There haven't been people looking at them yet. Talk to me a little bit about the evolution and where we're at now in the industry as far as the broader understanding and legislative pressure coming at us.
Yeah, it's a fascinating journey legislatively. And it's funny that you mentioned Mike Burnham and Ken Woolley, the talk about the godfathers of self-storage. Those guys know from the beginning that self-storage was a play into real estate that for many instances was a landhold. And while they had this property, what way they could create cash flow is to put up these properties, which were relatively simple back then. Certainly many of them didn't have exterior fencing or lighting or security. And so we evolved into what everyone was called the second generation, third generation, fourth generation self-storage facilities, which are now these multi-story, beautiful facilities. There was a story in the Wall Street Journal just last week about the effort to create facades that meet neighborhood requirements for beautification, so self-storage fits into neighborhoods for commercial development. So that's a whole separate side of what has become
Maurice
self-storage.
Pagoda, and I'm going to throw in
Yeah,
another plug for the
yeah,
podcast. Another legend
godfather.
in this
Yeah.
space that has been on the podcast before, but was in the Wall Street Journal article as well. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
No, no,
interrupt, but I
no.
couldn't
And he did a
resist.
great job of talking about what self-storage has become. But as a service industry to our customers, we've had to accommodate some of these urban challenges to fit in with the infrastructures of the communities. And I think we've done an amazing job. And some of these facilities are gosh darn beautiful. I mean, absolutely beautiful. Sometimes you don't even know they're self-storage facilities,
Yeah.
which was part of the story. But I digress. So here we are with this evolution of a real estate industry from a landhold with limited development to these multi-story beautiful buildings. But in that way, it has led to this legislative and government oversight, consumer focus, because now we are a true real estate industry with millions of customers that are affected by what we do, and these million people have legislators that they complain to when they want changes, or they have lawyers that they talk to when they're unhappy. And now they also have social media and Yelp and Google and all the things that affect operations. So we've become this quiet industry into a very clear, viable, visible industry. And I think that's been part of the legislation evolution of our industry, as well as the legal evolution of our industry, is we're no longer a hidden small commodity real estate business. We are a multi-billion-dollar industry that gets a lot of attention.
I think that's fascinating. You brought up a point, and Maurice, I'll go back to him. It's funny talking to him in his early days in Michigan, also in the 1980s when he got started. He wouldn't build new storage in an area that had 2 net rentable square feet. Right now, we're like over 7 nationally on average. I bring that up because I'm looking out my window to good guys at Kiwi 2 Steel up on the 3rd floor of a multi-story that a friend of mine's building, literally right across the street from me. Is that part of the issue that we're facing? I mean, you alluded to it a little bit, but we have these multi-stories now. I told you earlier off camera, I'm talking to somebody in the Bronx about doing a conversion there. And, we're in major urban areas, and it's no longer just like, hey, a 7-acre industrial parcel that you're trying to hang on to forever. You want to cash flow it a little bit. But self-storage now, not only has it become institutionalized, but it's become on Main Street instead of on a back road that someone only goes to if they want to rent storage.
Well, it's not a bad thing. It's been an incredible utilization of property, and certainly, again, I see it as a service business to a consumer and business enterprise where we are solving their problems with regard to space and how they handle their personal property, but also their business inventory and the logistics of their operations. So there's a tremendous amount of opportunity still in self-storage, which surprises for me to even say that, because you would think, based upon the net rentable space and population, we would be sort of hitting a totality of what we could do for availability for self-storage, but it's still growing, and there still seems to be supply and demand for self-storage. So the legal side, again, is just an outgrowth of its popularity and notoriety. I mean, again, to have 2 articles in the Wall Street Journal last week about self-storage is fascinating to me. Believe me, all of my friends and colleagues sent me those articles because one was a positive sense about, maybe a little negative about the moratoriums or the restrictions on development. The other one was the story about the guy who had spent maybe $100,000 over the last 30 years storing stuff that he didn't even want anymore. So a lot of this is a cultural aspect of who we are as people, and the collection of property, the legacy feeling of how we feel about property and the meaning of those collectibles in our lives. So there's so much psychology and practicality that goes into it. The bottom line is this, from a legal perspective, is it's a great industry. There's wonderful operators out there, but there are laws governing the operation of our little business that have to be followed, or there's a price to be paid. And that's really what I've done my entire career, is educate people and write about it and remind people and counsel people to stay within the guardrails of our laws to run the best operation they can relative to those laws, and best practices and best consumer support And I think a lot of people are listening. We have tremendous attendance at our national meetings and our state meetings. We have response to programs like this where people want to listen into the legal issues to make sure they're being compliant. Our clients, our operators, our managers in the self-storage industry don't want to make mistakes. They want to do the right thing, and that's why they're attentive to these issues.
I know you're based in Atlanta, Florida, Georgia, Alabama, SSA Hall of Fame member, so you
Well,
kind of have a
Georgia
stronghold on.
SSA Hall of Fame, Georgia SSA Hall.
Maybe my research was wrong. It gave me some poor information. I apologize. I overstated your legend.
Well, I
That
hope
being
AI
said,
is right, maybe one day, but now so far
I
it's
love it. It's
Georgia.
projecting. I want to ask nationally, right? Obviously, we had last year SB 709 got passed. Rate, what's the word I'm looking for here?
Well, it's not rent control, but
Not rent control, but
rate transparency.
transparency. That was the word I couldn't come up with. So thanks for helping out. 7 states across the country introduced some type of a rate cap legislation. Fortunately, none of them passed. We talked about INT 495, which is in front of the New York City Council, keeps coming up every year, which would be an aggressive rate cap. 2% they want to cap rates at. What New York City did institute that's supposed to go into effect in August was a lease modification, right? They're now telling you what you can and can't say. We talked a little bit about this before. Tell me a little bit about, not a lease modification, registration. If you're a licensing, that was the word I was having trouble with words today. You'd think I did this for a living. A licensing law. So if you're operating self-storage in the city, you have to register. Talk to me a little bit about what that is looking like. I know you said that they just released a first draft of what the thing's going to look like.
Yeah, well, we see this pressure on legislative governance oversight over industries, again, that are getting a lot of consumer attention and concern. And I think it's not really warranted. I think the Extra Space lawsuit, and I've said this publicly and I've written articles about it, I think we have yet to see how Extra Space responds to that lawsuit and provides evidence of their compliance with the New York lien law and compliance with their lease agreement, and the demonstration that their customers agreed to certain terms and conditions of being a tenant as part of those lease agreements. But for whatever reason, New York City has decided that it wanted to sort of pedal to the metal, double down on self-storage, and created this licensing requirement. And this first draft that we've seen, I think will unfortunately significantly impact operations in the city and make it challenging to be a self-storage operator in the city, to have to go through these licensing inspections and obligations, more than I would have expected. But be that as it may, I think what we're seeing nationally, again, is attention on the self-storage industry. I think a little of it, again, is unwarranted. I think the majority of operators follow the guidelines very well, work very hard to maintain their property to the best they can. And look, things happen at self-storage facilities. The thing about the Extra Space lawsuit that bothered me, just as an example, was the fact that rodents got into the self-storage building allegedly. But we're talking New York. I mean, this thing about the surprise factor of having rats in a building in New York against self-storage would make it seem like that it doesn't happen anywhere else. And we all know that some of the priciest penthouses in New York have rats. So, and some of the government-owned buildings in New York have rats. So how is it that we are put under the microscope that says self-storage is somehow bad because rats got into our building? Now, part of it is about transparency and making clear to customers that there is a risk of loss or damage to their goods when they're in self-storage, like there would be if they left them in their attics or their basements or their friends' houses or someone's garage. There's always a risk to property being damaged. And the obligation of the tenant to be responsible for its own property through insurance or protection programs, something that if case something happens, they have a remedy to recover for that loss. And then lastly, and I've written about this recently, the ultimate obligation the tenant has when they rent a self-storage facility to be responsible for what's in there, how it's stored, and to be checking regularly as to the condition of their property. If there's a problem, let the landlord know so the landlord can work on that. That to me is an obligation for the customer to mitigate its damages by letting the landlord know what's happening inside the unit. Otherwise, the landlord will not know what's happening inside of a locked self-storage unit. They can't. They can't go in and inspect. It's not a warehouse. It's a rented self-storage unit. It's much different than anything else out there in real estate.
It's fascinating. I might be the only person who read through the 173 pages of complaints that were filed with the DW. Said the Department of Workforce and Consumer Protection, which is the division within New York City that's in charge of enforcing this stuff, and ultimately brought the lawsuit against Extra Space. First of all, Extra Space was far from the only person referenced in that. To your point, there were far more complaints about rats getting into a unit than there were about any type of a price issue or maybe a non-disclosure, like somebody claiming that they weren't informed of what might actually happen in the lease.
Right.
I guess this goes to like a greater question philosophically, which is like, at what point is it incumbent on the business owner to go above and beyond? Like, we all know Extra Space, right? Extra Space, God bless them, they make a lot of money off their tenant protection program. They are very diligent about offering that tenant protection program to everyone who comes through their door because it's a source of revenue for them. At what point is it going above and beyond to force an operator to go way beyond the normal course of duty to explain to a consumer what might typically happen? And from your legal perspective and your expertise, has storage been doing what they should be doing on that front?
Well, I'll tell you, many websites that I review of self-storage operator do an excellent job of educating their customer as to what self-storage is. I mean, I've even gone to the point where I've recognized, I mean, an issue of lithium batteries have come up a lot in self-storage units because the risk of overheating and causing fires. And then the issue is, how do we educate our customers? Because we don't know what they put in their unit. We don't do an inventory of the property being stored. Again, it's the self-storage is the rental of space suitable for storage. You're just renting space. The customer is responsible for the care, custody, and control of what they put in the space. So we don't know if they're putting things in there that they shouldn't. I mean, the lease agreement tells them that what they should not put in there, food items, because that creates rodents and infestation. They should not put in flammable materials, causes fires. And now we've had this recent issue concerning lithium batteries. So I was curious, and I would look at clients' websites, and there are educational pieces about what they should store and not store. And it goes into a discussion of, don't store lithium batteries in a self-storage unit, especially a non-climate control facility that is subject to extreme excessive heat. So anyway, we can only do what we can do. The customer is given, from a legal perspective, a rental agreement that sets forth its terms and conditions of its responsibility as a tenant. They are deemed to have read it and understood it before they sign it. And if they sign it, then they understand their responsibility as a tenant. So I'm not sure what more we could do. There's certainly brochures and other materials that I've seen that operators try to express clarity to their customers about those roles and responsibilities as a tenant. But, there's a certain reality in our world. You can only teach so much, and otherwise tenants are responsible for their own actions.
I thought that was one of my and maybe this is just me. I'm gonna open myself up a little bit to criticism here, but one of my things about SB 709 was, the California law requires storage operators to put certain things in the lease agreement. Some of them have to be on page one, which opens up its whole thing of challenges. But how much can you really shove into page one before you make stuff unreadable? I've never opened and read the actual lease agreement in my life. And I know as a lawyer, that probably makes you cringe a little bit. But the ultimate question I'm trying to ask is, like, is someone actually going to read this stuff? And at the end of the day, we know SB 709, it was one of the state senators in California. Her mother had a rate increase happen a couple times in a unit, and that's ultimately what started that ball rolling. At what point is it on the consumer versus on the operator to like understand what you're getting and understand what the potential is on? Again, it's not your family home, and for whatever reason legally we've determined that there's a difference there and how we're going to treat it. And then I'll ask you as well, like, a lot of attention has been paid to ECRIs and the policy of starting someone low and aggressively raising rates. It's something that I talk about with almost every storage developer I know. Hey, we're getting close to physical occupancy. We're going to start pinging rates up here soon when we get there. Where's that boundary there? How much of it is on the customer? How much of it's on the operator? And how much is someone actually going to read if you do put a disclosure in a lease agreement?
Well, lots of questions there. Let me
I put a little bit in one question. I apologize for that.
let me break this down. I mean, if you're talking about, going back to old British law with respect to the parties entering into a contract and the obligation of each party to understand what they're doing when they enter into the contract, it has resulted in the development of English law, which is, in the courts have upheld this, that if you present a contract to someone with certain obligations and consideration of services, and this person executes that agreement. Now, in the old days, it was in writing. Old days, it would be signed in blood. Today, where it's a click and accept. But the courts have upheld that as a means of confirming the enforceability of a contract. So, should a customer read its contract? Yes. Should they ask questions to understand it? Yes. Is there an obligation on the landlord to explain it to the customer when they're asked? Certainly. But I would also tell you, and I'm guilty of this as well, and I'll say this about Uber. When I became an Uber customer and I click and accept that I want to drive from here to here, and I know there's tremendous terms and conditions in an Uber contract, have I contacted Uber and tried to renegotiate the terms of the Uber contract before I got into it? No. It is what I've accepted as a responsibility that I have myself to what those terms are if I want the benefit of the service. Same thing true with self-storage. People can come, they can inspect a unit, they can meet with the manager, they can make an appointment. They can have the contract in advance. Many operators will give those contracts in advance for people to read. Otherwise, they put their stuff in the space, they close the door, they lock it, they sign the contract, and they're deemed to have read and understood it. And that's really the way our enterprise as law works, and the courts have upheld these contracts. Now, caveat that with deceptive trade practices. If an operator says that a unit is being rented for $1 for a year, right? And someone enters into that rental agreement, and after a month, that dollar becomes $100, that's a deceptive trade practice. But if you advertise that it's $1 for 1 month, and then it converts to a standard rate in month 2, that's not a deceptive trade practice. Now, SB 709 went to the next level of transparency to clarify what the maximum rental rate would be over a 12-month period. And look, you even have U-Haul that's gone to a price lock guarantee in response to that sort of approach of having transparency in your pricing. And I know a lot of other operators are now doing certain hybrids of that, whether it's 6-month locks or other promotional offerings. But what they're trying to do now, because of SB 709 and the attention that they've asked for with regard to this issue that you asked about, is transparency. Putting on their website and putting in the rental agreement a very clear explanation of when the promotional rate ends and when the new rate, whatever that new rate is, will begin. And I think that does a great job of solving the stress point of pricing in self-storage.
I'm going to ask you your opinion because you're one of these people that speaks at a lot of state SSAs. Obviously, you just spoke at ISS in April. You spoke at SSA. You speak regularly. You take a lot of time to go and contribute your expertise and your knowledge to the industry. Is that becoming even more important now as we get into this age where legislatively and legally the industry has become much more, forefront than it was in the 1980s and 90s? Is it more important now that people that are in the industry get involved and go support what's happening?
Well, absolutely, yes. I mean, in fact, this is something that Carlos Caslow and I, Carlos was the former general counsel of the SSA for many decades. And Carlos and I have worked together for years in something called the Self-Storage Legal Network of providing information to operators to know what's going on. But we've seen this evolution of the importance of law in self-storage happen so much that the SSA created their legal center and then hired Joe Doherty to be their legislative director. And then he added Daniel Bryant as associate counsel, and they've created this entire legal operations center as part of the SSA because 10, 15 years ago, there was activity and there was legislative movement and discussion and some modernization of laws. Well, these guys have taken it to the next level. And it's happening so often and so fast that if you're an operator and you're not up to date as to what your state's laws are, you're behind already. And that's something you have to be careful about. That's why when you say, why do I go out there and talk about these things, is because I'm hoping the people that are listening go back and look at their leases, go back, look at their lien operations, or talk to their vendors who are helping them do their lien operations, and make sure everybody's on the same page.
I love that. My other podcast, I talk about especially the regional events, but the national ones as well. I look at, and maybe you can speak to this a little bit. Public Storage obviously announced last month they're going to buy NSA. They expect to close third quarter. We know Extra Space absorbed Life Storage a couple years ago. The speed at which consolidation is happening in this industry, I'm interested to get your take on that. Having started in 1987, when it was as mom and pop of an industry as you could get. What's it been like for you to see the way this industry has evolved?
I picked the right horse. I mean, that's what's so interesting in my my life as a lawyer, is in the world of real estate. Whereas I had plenty of other partners that I was working with, chose commercial or multifamily. I decided that I really enjoyed working with the people that were doing self storage. But it was a small, I call it a fledgling industry back then in the 80s, early 90s. That's why it was so funny you mentioned like Mike Burnham. When I first met Mike in the early 90s, I mean, and I've now forgotten what the original storage company was that he had started with his father back then. But that, that became public, and then became private, and then became public, and then grew to this, and then Storage Mart. So it's been amazing to watch this growth in our industry. One of my first clients was a company called SureGuard, which eventually got merged into Public Storage. So it's just, things have been moving so fast and so amazingly over the last 40 years. It's just been fun to watch. And I've watched, really at the bottom line, I've watched some folks that were small real estate developers become billionaires. And that is an amazing thing to watch people become successful because they stuck with it, even in hard times. Look, we've had some cycles in our industry over the last 40 years that I've watched people, and I've held hands watching people go through some tough times when their banks wanted those properties back, and they fought and restructured deals. We've had our cycles, and we will again in this industry.
Yeah.
But the fortitude of some of these folks that saw the vision of what they could create and ultimately understood the service that they were providing to their customers, again, whether it be individuals or businesses that understand the need and importance of storage in the enterprise and economic system of their communities, it's a piece of it now. People need it. And as long as they're willing to figure out how to provide it, they will continue to be successful.
I'm going to pivot a little bit. This is really a heart-centered podcast, and you've been so grateful, or generous. That's the word. I'm having trouble with words today. So generous with your time and your legal
Leave it
knowledge.
to a lawyer to make you worried about what you're going to say.
I know,
Sorry.
Right? My English professors at Tufts are rolling around today. That's too funny.
Repeat that. Go ahead. Yes, go ahead.
I want to ask you about your motivation, because I mentioned earlier, man, you've gone above and beyond the natural call of duty of a legal professional in the industry. And so what pushes Scott Zucker to go above and beyond, to be the cream of the crop and the guy that's out at the forefront helping to create what now is as institutionalized of an industry as you could possibly see?
That's a big question, but I'll give you some of the answers coming, because I've been working with Modern Storage Media, MSM, who just did the beautiful Messenger article about me. But I've been working with them on what is
front cover, man. Congratulations. That's pretty awesome.
Really meaningful to have them do that. And Brad Hatfield wrote a beautiful article. Really got into some of the family stories that I know you like to talk about, or what drives people. But what I was to say is they're publishing what is going to come out as the Journal of Self-Storage Law, which is a compilation of almost 40 years of writing on self-storage legal issues. So, I mean, I'm driven to support the members of this industry who I've grown to love and admire and appreciate. And as they have, I think, me, that I'm out there working for them and defending them and trying to teach them and protect them. I mean, ultimately, that's what I've been. I've been a counselor to try to protect operators in these last 40 years. What drives me? I wish I was laying down on a couch a little to talk about this, but I think you'd relate to this. You always want to make your parents proud, whether they're with you or they're not with you. So a lot of that is driven by your family and your effort to support those you love and work hard to do that. And that's really what I've been trying to do for 40 years is make a living. But I've had the benefit of making a living with people that are appreciative and supportive and responsive and smart and successful. So it's all been a great ride.
How blessed are we to work in this incredible industry? To your point about the people we're surrounded with on a daily basis, not just successful, not just making money off of what they're doing, not just having grit, but treating each other in a way that quite frankly, I've never experienced in any other. I haven't been in storage for 40 years. I've been there for 5. I had another 30 years of a working career before that. What a blessing to have the people that we're surrounded by on a daily basis.
I agree. It's a unique industry. I mean, I've worked in a lot of other real estate verticals. The people in self-storage are unique and support each other. There's enough business to go around. The competition level is not cutthroat. It's cooperative. It's really interesting to watch these state associations and the people of these meetings work to help each other. The rising tide raises all boats. I mean, that's really what's happened in our industry. And we've had, great state storage associations, national and state, supporting those local efforts, which has been amazing to watch as well. And look, at the bottom line, I love it. I love talking to people. I love writing. I love educating. So it's been a plus for me as well. And look, even doing this with you, Thaddeus, I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about this industry and remind people. And of course, it's very important to remind people laws are ever changing and they have to stay up to date. Whether they're relying on third-party managers to manage their properties, then they need to make sure that when they talk to their third-party managers and are doing the audits and updates with those management companies, that they're asking to make sure that they're up to date with their process and procedures as well, and their best practices, and they're paying attention. I'm sure they are, but it's important to ask.
Blessed to have you take a half hour, I've gone overboard, a little more than a half hour out of your incredibly busy schedule. You are truly a gem in our industry, Scott. And I think I can say that very safely. You're someone that is respected by all and have gone, as I said, above and beyond in your service to what we're all doing. Of course, we recognize you make a living doing it and there's a tangible benefit on that end of it, but you go way beyond what it would take for that part of it to be in place. And that's greatly appreciated. Everybody watching, make sure you keep an eye out for MSM. Scott's going to be the cover guy on mainstream Modern Storage Media. There we go. Brad Hadfield, great. Little Birdie told me that you and I may both have a little bit something in common with Modern Storage Magazine here soon. So keep your eye out for that too. You can also check out the Storage Unlocked YouTube channel if you have not seen Scott's segment of How Faith Fuels Your Business yet. Get a little bit more insight into what drives Scott Zucker, and I'm blessed also for you taking the time to do that with me as well. Somebody wants to get a hold of Scott Zucker after seeing this to utilize your legal knowledge and your expertise. If they're involved in storage, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
I would say email may be the fastest way, scott@wzlegal.com. Thanks for putting that down there so they can reach out to me.
I told you before, Eric behind the scenes is the guy. He takes care of me. Eric had that email up and ready to go. It was pretty cool. He's Scott Zucker. You can reach out to him at WZ Legal. Also, as he said, part of the Self-Storage Legal Network. As I've said before, can't thank you enough for taking the time to come and share your knowledge and have a little bit of fun for a half hour with me. I appreciate it, Scott.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Want to give one more shout out to my friends at Kiwi 2 Construction, simply the best crews in steel. If you're doing self-storage or small bay flex, reach out to Wayne and his team at kiwiconstruction.com. Get them involved as early as you can. They can help you save a lot of challenges and ultimately save a lot of money on your development project. That is it for this week's episode. He is Scott Zucker. I'm Thaddeus Campbell. We'll see you next week on Stories Behind the Door podcast.